Hello, everybody, and welcome inside Austin Rooney's election predictions. This is a new channel that I am starting. I'm going to be posting a video every day from here until Election Day. We're just 15 days out. Election Day on November 6th. So 2 weeks from tomorrow, and in these videos, I'm going to be breaking down a specific state moving forward. So I'm going to look at states like Nevada, Arizona, Florida, even look at Texas, Missouri, and some others. But I want to make sure that I look at some of these in depth to get an idea of the fundraising, get a look at the polling, and all the different information. Today, though, it's just going to be an overview of my Senate predictions. So that's what we're going to have moving forward, just to give you an idea of what I'm going to be doing and how I'm going to be classifying these states. There are only 3 ratings here on 270 to win. There is the safe column, or the likely column, whichever you like to call it. Then there is the leaning column. This is going to be leaning, and this is tilting. So now you have an idea of what the colors are. Tilting I have as 3 points or fewer. Leaning is 3 to 10 points, and 10 plus I have as solid. Okay, so there's one last thing I just like to say. I don't know how to turn that yellow circle off. As to why it's there, I can't tell you. I'd like to turn it off, but I can't. So that's just what's going on. You're just going to have to bear with me with this yellow circle that's on the screen. I can't see it when I'm clicking. I only see it when I go through the video. So now let's get started with my Senate predictions. These are all the states that anybody ever could have thought were up for grabs in this Senate race. I could even add Virginia or Minnesota into this. They're not going to the Republican Party, period, the end. So let's start with the Rust Belt, because these were states that Trump won back in 2016. Some people thought he may have a shot at them in 2018 in the Senate elections. It's not going to happen for a majority of them. Pennsylvania definitely going the way of the Democrats. Bob Casey, his family has a long history in Pennsylvania. He has a very solid lead over Lou Barletta. In Ohio, Sherrod Brown's winning that one also. Again, these are probably 12 to 15-point wins for the Democratic Party, not even in the leaning column. Michigan's a little different in that John James was thought to be a big-time, up-and-coming figure in the Republican Party. It's not going the way of the Republicans. It's going the way of the Democrats. Debbie Stabenow has a very high approval rating in the state. She's going to win that as well. Moving over to Wisconsin, Tammy Baldwin is leading Leah Vukmir. It's closer. I'm going to put this in the lean column. I could see this being a 5 to a 10-point race in Wisconsin. Tammy Baldwin may win by more than that, but what we're seeing right now indicates that it is leaning in the way of the Democrats. And the special election in Minnesota is saying the same thing. Tina Smith has a lead over Karen Housley. It's not huge, but there is a lead in favor of in favor of Tina Smith. Last state we're going to look at before we start classifying Republican states is New Jersey. This is a closer race than a lot of people expected. Stockton University had a poll that had it within a 2% difference, and it was a statistical tie within the margin of error. There have been some other polls from Bob Hugen that have showed him within a couple of points. The fact of the matter is that Bob Menendez is leading this race as of right now. Things could change over the next couple of weeks. We may get different data coming out, but right now, Bob Menendez is leading Bob Hugen. It's not by a very large margin. It's probably by about 5 to 8%, but it's enough right now so that Bob Menendez is leaning. The state is leaning in his direction. Now, some Republican states. First, we'll start off with the Mississippi special election. This is leaning Republican. I could even put it in the likely to solid Republican. The initial race on November 6th there is going to end up in a runoff, and it's probably going to take place in December, I believe, when that special election takes place in Mississippi. It's probably going to end up going to that special election, and that initial vote on November 6th may not even go to the Republicans, but once it goes to the runoff, I'm almost certain that we will see the Republicans win in that special election in Mississippi, because then it's just the two candidates going off against each other. The next state we're going to classify, Texas and Tennessee, are both leaning Republican. Beto has had a shot at Texas in the past. There have been polls that have showed him really, really close. But as of right now, it is still leaning the way of the Republicans. I think that Beto is going to put up a pretty good fight. He already has. He's raised a lot of money. But it still is a state leaning in favor of the Republicans. The same thing goes for the state of Tennessee. Marsha Blackburn is a candidate who was actually trailing. If you go back 4 or 5 months ago, now she's up by as many as double digits in some polls, including the New York Times Siena poll. Two more races we're going to look at that I'm going to end up classifying as either leaning or even likely potentially. And those are North Dakota and West Virginia. We're going to start with North Dakota. This is a race that if you go back a few months, you go back towards February, Heitkamp was leading by 3 points in a Gravis poll. Well, that all changed by the time June came around. It was leaning in favor of Kevin Cramer, and now it is solid in favor of Kevin Cramer. Fox News has him up by 12 after the Kavanaugh vote, a 16-point lead for the representative, Kevin Cramer. I'm going to keep this in the leaning Republican column. I'm not going to move it all the way to the solid Republican, but this is definitely leaning Republican. Next one up is West Virginia, and this is an interesting race. We'll get to Nevada in a minute, but we're going to start with West Virginia here, and this is a race that Joe Manchin is very clearly leading in. He voted for Kavanaugh. He was the only Democrat to do so, and he has himself a very healthy 12-point lead. I'm not going to put this in the solid either. I think that the Republicans theoretically have a shot in West Virginia because of how Republican it's gone in the past, but especially this last election cycle. But there are voters who are willing to go across party lines in West Virginia, and we're seeing it right here with Joe Manchin. He's a moderate Democrat, someone who oftentimes sides with the Republicans, and he has a very big race in West Virginia that he appears to be ready to win. Now moving on to the toss-up states. These are all the ones you've got left. Dean Heller versus Jackie Rosen. Jackie Rosen was leading in earlier polls. CNN polls she was leading in, and she was leading the majority of the others. A Gravis poll, a Suffolk poll. But the last 3 polls that have come out, Emerson has Dean Heller up by 7. He's the incumbent. New York Times Siena poll has him up by 2. NBC News Marist poll has Heller up by 2 as well. This one has all indications of tilting Republican. It's not leaning Republican. It's not 3 to 10 points yet. Maybe it will become that, but right now it's tilting in favor of the Republicans. The polling data shows that to be the case. Next up is Arizona. We're moving west to east here, folks. McSally versus Sinema. McSally is a very good candidate for the Republicans. She is a representative. I believe she was the first fighter pilot ever to be in battle as a woman, or first woman to be a fighter pilot in battle. And Kristen Sinema is a candidate that has good name recognition, and she has a relatively positive approval rating as well. I think it's in the mid-40s or so, and similar for the disapproval. So she's got some decent numbers as well. This is really a neck-and-neck race. It is too close to call for me on either side. The New York Times poll, which is a very good poll, had McSally up by a couple points. The ABC one had her up by 6, but CBS and Fox News have shown Sinema leading. Again, just too close to call at this time, but this could really go either way. Next one up is Montana. This one will not go either way, in my opinion. I think this one is leaning pretty solidly in favor of Jon Tester. He's up by a few points at least. In the RCP poll, it's closer. It has it at just a 3-point race, and I'd like to see more polls because even though it's a 3-point race, I think that this is going to be probably closer to a 5 or a 6-point win for Jon Tester. We've seen those numbers on 538. I think that's what it ends up being, but Matt Rosendale puts up a pretty good fight. And if we could see more information out of Virginia, out of Montana, and if it shows Matt Rosendale winning, well, maybe he has a shot. But at this point in time, it's going to be in the leaning Democratic column. All right, moving on to the final few states here. I've got Missouri, Indiana, and Florida are the only ones left. I'm going to take a look at the 538 numbers for Missouri as well. RCP has it at 0.2 point advantage for Hawley. That's a complete toss-up. There's no doubt about that. 538 shows a slightly different map, and it's interesting because they give a 5 and 8 chance to McCaskill retaining this seat. But if you look at the margins, last 10 polls, 7 go the way of Hawley, 2 are tied, just 1 in favor of Claire McCaskill. Yet if you look at the House effects, each and every one, aside from CNN, he has, Nate Silver does, as polls that are that have House effects and biases towards the Republicans. I'm not so sure that's entirely accurate. some of these, a 0.6% House effect over with the Ipsos poll. I'm not sure that's 100% correct. I've seen a lot of left-leaning polls from Ipsos, especially in Texas. It's the only one that's had Beto O'Rourke actually winning in a poll. Fox News is actually a very independent polling network. They actually work with a Democratic polling firm and a Republican polling firm, so they get the most accurate results. I'm surprised to see this 1.5% House effect in favor of the Democrats there as well. I'm going to leave this as a complete toss-up. The majority of the polling data shows it's leading Republican, but the House effects are showing maybe it's going towards the Democrats. It's too close to call at this point in time. It's going to remain a toss-up. Next couple of states, we're going to look at Indiana first. This is actually a three-way race because the Libertarian is doing so well. Libertarian Brenton is putting up 6 to 8 points pretty consistently. The poll from the NBC News / Marist gave Donnelly a 3-point lead, a 2-point lead from Fox, and a 4-point lead from Gravis. These are all polls that are a little bit older. I'd like to take notice of another poll and some other polls from Indiana that have come out in the last couple of days. This Gravis poll, of course, was recent, but the other ones I would like to take a look at is this American Viewpoint poll, which is actually Braun's internal polling data. It gave him a 4-point advantage. This 5.6% House effect seems warranted. I think that that's probably where this race stands, a 2 to 3 point lead in favor of Joe Donnelly. Joe Donnelly is definitely favored to win. I'm actually living in the state of Indiana at college right now, and it is. I do think Donnelly is going to end up taking it. We're seeing a lot of Donnelly ads. Donnelly is trying to portray himself like Donald Trump, saying, hey, I'm basically a Republican. I want the border wall. I voted for Neil Gorsuch. He did not vote for Brett Kavanaugh. We'll have to see if that ends up going against him. Right now, though, we're seeing the Survey USA poll. That came out today as well, or in the last couple of days, and this shows a 1-point race. This is a very close. This is good news for Braun because these are all statistical ties at this point, all within that margin of error. So I think that Braun is within striking distance, but currently it's definitely tilting the way of the Democratic Party in favor of Joe Donnelly. So I'm going to put tilting Democratic for Indiana. The last state I'm going to qualify, and if you had asked me 2 or 3 days ago, I would have said it's a complete toss-up, maybe even tilting Republican. But right now, the last 2 polls that come out, we saw a poll from CNN yesterday, saw a poll from Quinnipiac today. Both of these show a lead for Bill Nelson. And Quinnipiac has generally polled and has had good polls for Nelson throughout the campaign, even when a lot of people thought Rick Scott were winning back in the months of August and early September. We see polls from Quinnipiac, a 7-point lead back in September. We see another one, I think it was this is a tie from Quinnipiac, 4-point lead back in February. So we've generally seen polls that have favored Nelson, but still, this is definitely a race that we've seen now. Multiple polls that give Nelson a lead. This is after Hurricane Michael. Rick Scott supposedly did a pretty good job with Hurricane Michael, is what some of the data was saying. Most people approved of the job he did. And the St. Pete poll may bear that out, but if you look at the details of the St. Pete's poll, that also shows the early data, early voting is in the favor of Bill Nelson. So I'm going to put this in the tilt Democratic column. Again, if you had asked me a couple of days ago, I probably would have put it in the tilt Republican column, but the newer polling data and the newer information that has come out has led me to put this in the tilt Democratic column. So that's all we've got today, folks. It's a 51-47 map in terms of which states are tilting in which directions as of right now. Hopefully we get more data. Hopefully we see some other good polls like the New York Times poll, which is given an A rating by 538. They've got their live polling going on. As I mentioned in the beginning of the video, I'm going to be I'm going to be looking at individual states and their polling data in more depth in the coming days. So stay tuned for that. Thanks so much for watching today.